Hello again. This week while reading in the chapter, there was one topic that stood out to me. The reason, because for the first assignment we did in this class, when we had to choose a specific area within social work, I chose adoption in social work. And so in this chapter, it talks about adoption, and I wanted to look a little bit more into that. The other reason was that assignment also inspired me to do a lit review for one of my other classes on a specific area within adoption, which is transracial adoption. But I thought I would look a little bit more into today the role of social workers in adoption, what they do, kind of the problems they might face within the program, and what problems the family might face that are trying to adopt. So, to start off with the news article, it was more of a personal story in a way. It wasn't a typical news article. It was narrative based, but it was a story about a woman who's trying to adopt. So the title of the news article was Carolyn Hacks, a prospective parent fears she won't bond with adopted kids. And so it talks about this personal story of Carolyn and how she and her husband were trying to have children for many years, and they tried all the different things to have children, but to no prevail. And they started thinking about adoption and maybe just like the possibility of adopting. But she talked about how important it is to be prepared for that situation and the things that are needed in that situation. And so she talked about how people who often think about adoption, they kind of don't get the help they need to figure it out. And so she focused a lot about how there's resources available to those people, which are social workers in the adoption area and counseling. So she said that if you were struggling with the worries of adoption or children, that if you were serious about it, your next step would be to counsel through a reputable adoption resource or social workers. And because that's what they do, that's their job. They work with prospective parents every day. And so she's like, use those resources. But the other side of her story was the part of doubt. She had a lot of doubt with the adoption process and raising kids that weren't her own. She ended up saying there are no guarantees, and if you go into thinking you might never bond with an adopted child, then you will probably never bond. So she said to work with both a therapist and an adoption social worker, and then the question to ask yourself to see if this is something for you is, if you saw a child who was alone and scared, could you take them in as your own? And then she said, if you hesitated answering that, don't adopt. Because it's that doubt and fear that, you won't get along with an adopted child that becomes your reality. So if you're not set on putting in the work and the effort and being able to love, then you probably won't have a pleasant experience. For the journal article, which was actually pretty interesting, it was a study on attachment theory. And so it was developments, debates, and recent applications in social work, social care, and education. And so they talked about attachment disorder, which is highly linked to adoption. Just thinking about, like, there's parents who have children who are not of their own, and they're trying to make a family and mesh. So it's a little difficult. The National Institute of Health and Care Excellence has made clear that the term attachment disorder should only be used when a young person has been formally diagnosed by qualified professionals in accordance with the established criteria. They say that furthermore, social workers have been advised to use the term attachment with caution, and that in most instances, the more general term relationship might suffice. And so, this study was about this attachment theory and how adopted children might go through this stage, and so they talked about the importance of social workers and other adoption service people to be careful with how they went talking with the adopted children and their parents, because they really needed to see if there were any problems without bringing them up in a way by talking about this attachment disorder. The clinical psychologist and the social workers were also emphasizing the importance of affect regulation and drawing on theories that are influenced by evolutionary theory and neuroscience in general. And the social workers are responding to the concerns of adopted parents by working directly with school staff members to create an environment that reduced the anxieties of individual children. So they would kind of base the system on the individual, not like adopted children in general. So it was very specific to each child, so that they didn't go through this attachment disorder with their adopted parents. So that was the journal article. For the Code of Ethics, it's actually... So I chose just section 1.01 in the Code of Ethics. It's called, it's under the social worker's ethical responsibilities to clients, and it's under commitment to clients. It says social workers' primary responsibility is to promote the well-being of clients in general. Clients' interests are primary. However, social workers' responsibility to the larger society or specific legal obligations may on limited occasions supersede the loyalty owed clients, and clients should be so advised. Examples include when a social worker is required by law to report that a client has abused a child or is certain to harm himself or others. So I don't know, I chose that as the section because it talks about how social workers are responsible for the well-being of their clients. And so in the terms of adoption, they need to do what's best for not only the adopted children, but for the families, and see what works best in that family system to ensure that there's a healthy relationship between all members of the family. And then kind of just to go off of that, it's kind of like a social worker in adoption, a social worker's responsibility to ensure that the relationship before the actual adoption process happens goes smoothly. The adoption process goes smoothly, and then the most important factor that adoption social workers are in charge of is making sure that it continues afterwards with visits and checkups to see how the relationships between the parents and the child or children are doing. So it's not just a pre-step, it's the whole process that they're involved. And then just to wrap up with a question, thinking in broader terms, how can social workers help adoptive parents create a sense of trust and family friendship with their adopted children without crossing into an attachment disorder or any problems with attachment? And I'll leave you out with that question, and I'll see you guys next week.